Hi everyone. In this bite-sized bit, we're going to add weights to our various assignments so that we can calculate weighted averages for individual students and for the class as a whole. This is an extension of the past video, so please go watch the earlier gradebook video before you watch this one. Let's go ahead and get started. More realistically, in a gradebook, the various assignments that a student would complete in a class would have different weights. So in this particular case, I have added the weight of 25% for homework 1, 25% for homework 2, and 50% for exam 1. They're no longer equally weighted, so we're not going to be dividing by 3 to get an average for a student grade. And similarly, we're not going to be dividing by 12 to get the overall average for the class. The homeworks are worth less than the exam, which is pretty realistic. If I were to try to create this gradebook in an Excel spreadsheet, I would be using a sum product equation. So over in the right-hand column, if I look at my equation here next to Adams, my new calculation for their overall average in the class would be a multiplication of each of the weights times each of their grades. So 25% times 87 plus 25% times 88 plus 50% times 89. And sum product equation does a great job of this calculation. You can see that Adam's grade increased slightly from the earlier average, and that makes sense. Their grade in exam 1 is higher than their grades on homework 1 and homework 2. If I increase the weight of exam 1 from 33% to 50%, no longer equally weighted with the first two assignments, their grade should go up in the class just a little bit. And we see similar results for Benson and Carson, who did better on their exams than they did on their homework. And of course, we see no change for Daly. The other equation that would change is the equation for the overall class grade. And that's because really the overall class grade is an average of each of our student grades. So probably the easiest way to calculate this is to first calculate all of the individual student grades, add them all up, and then divide by the number of students. And that's what I would do in Excel, is add up all of my student grades and then divide by the number of rows in my gradebook or number of students in my gradebook to get my overall average in the class. So we'll have to make some changes in our code to reflect how the student grades will change and how the overall class grade will change. Do note that the calculation for individual assignment averages won't change. The weights don't make any difference to those calculations, so we don't need to change anything about that specific code. Let's go take a look at what we need to do in Visual Studio. The first thing I'm going to want to do in my code is add one more array in my global variables that reflect the new weights that I am providing for each of my assignments. I'm going to create a one-dimensional array called DEC assignment weights and set it equal to 25%, 25%, and 50% for each of my two homeworks and my exam. I'm going to treat this much like I treat the assignment names. I'm going to think about it as an array that moves from left to right, indexed values 0, 1, and 2 corresponding to the 0, 1, and 2 columns of my DEC grades two-dimensional array. So I can use these weights when appropriate for calculating either individual students' grades or my overall class grade. Let's take a look at the code we're going to write for our student average. I have to make a few changes to how I calculate things inside my loop. In this case, for the student average, I'm not going to just add up each of the students' grades inside the loop. I'm actually going to do some additional math. And I'm not going to divide by the number of assignments outside the loop because I'm going to have done all of my math inside the loop instead. So you can see that I've changed my variable for inside the loop to the student average. I'm going to do everything all at once inside the loop. And for my calculation inside the loop, I've changed things just a little bit. I'm still going to add up each of the individual grades for the student, but I'm going to add them after multiplying them by the appropriate weight. And you can see inside my loop that my index values for my row will stay locked for my grade because I'm locked on a particular student. The index value for my column for my gradebook will move from the first to the second to the third column, or 0 to 1 to 2. And my index value for my DEC assignment weights will also move the same direction that my columns move for my gradebook. It's going to go from column 0 to column 1 to column 2. So the first assignment for a student, which would be homework 1, will get multiplied by the first weight for that assignment, which is 25%. The second assignment will get multiplied by 25%, and the third assignment will get multiplied by 50%. That completes the overall calculation for an individual student's grades. 25% of the first assignment, 25% of the second assignment, and 50% of the last assignment. So once I'm done with the loop, I've completed their overall student average, and I can just send that out using a message box. Let's take a look at how weights affect our overall class average. The logic on this one is just a little bit trickier. What we want to do is move through every single grade in our gradebook, but depending upon which column we're in, we want to multiply by the appropriate weight. So I need to move from row to row to row in my gradebook, and when I'm in a particular row, I need to move from the first column to the last column and grab the specific grade from that row and column and multiply by the appropriate weight. So you can see inside my inner second loop, my equation has changed. I'm multiplying a specific grade by the weight for that specific column over and over and over again. So this will add up each of the grades for each individual student multiplied by the appropriate weights and add up all of them to add up all of the grades for all of the students in the class. So this overall sum is an unusual number, and that's why I've called it the weighted class sum, is it really isn't an addition of all of the grades in the class. They've all been weighted based upon their column weights. So it's a little bit of an unusual number. When we're done with calculating that sum outside the loop, I still need to do an additional division. The overall weighted class sum is across all of the students, but I need to know the average across all of my students, so I need to divide by the number of students or the number of rows in my gradebook, and we get that by dividing by getLength0. Once we've done this additional division, we can report the new class average that is based upon weighted assignments. That's it for this example of a gradebook with weighted assignments. Thanks for watching. See you next time.